Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Before the First Cast. Today's episode we are going to have Shawn Keene on. Shawn is actually coming in as we speak. Hey Shawn, can you hear me?
Yeah,
There
I can
you
hear you.
are.
How's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Good. It's getting late.
I know. I'm sorry. Had stuff with
Oh,
the
yeah.
family. So I've kind of already did our introduction. I want to get to it because it is kind of late. So let's kind of get into how you got into fishing and where it all started.
All right. So I actually grew up fishing. My dad, we used to go to the river all the time. So I grew up in southern Alabama, and the rivers there, they're all clay bank, super shallow during the summer. So you don't really need a boat. You can walk down the bank or walk in the middle of the river. I actually never started targeting bass until I was probably a few years ago when I bought a kayak. But my dad taught me, all the different knot tying, just the feel, the love for the fishing. That all came from him. He used to tournament fish a long time ago, actually against what is his name? Scott Martin's dad, Roland. He lived down in Miami, grew up in Homestead, Florida area. So I guess it's just in my blood that when I got older, I started to fall in love with the sport of bass fishing. I got a kayak when I moved to North Carolina and started fishing some of these brackish water or these tidal rivers. And
Mhm.
I didn't realize from where I come from, it was all fresh. And when I started fishing these rivers and realized there was largemouth bass and stuff, I started getting hooked on it. And then right before COVID in 2020, um, I'd spent a lot of time, watching Major League Fishing and a few of the other networks. And I seen a bass boat, wanted to get one, contacted English Choice, and then in a matter of weeks, I got my first bass boat, which is a Nitro Z18. And after fishing a few, years of tournaments out of the Z18, I realized I really needed that bigger boat to make those longer runs, but also just for safety of navigation. So now I'm in my Ranger and I'm loving it.
So when did you jump into the tournament scene, the big BFLs, MLF tournament scene?
Last year, this is my second year fishing BFL, so it's 2024. So 2023 would have been my first year of fishing the BFLs.
And was that a change for you from what you were used to?
Um, Honestly, not really. So I started off fishing the weekend series, the ABAs, just local tournaments. Um, I think, people that have fished tournaments enough know when you go fish a body of water and you're competing against the locals, you're competing against the local pros. They will kick your butt. I had my butt handed to me a few times, and I found out, practice. If you go out there and you keep trying new things, new techniques, and really locating those fish, you eventually you're gonna have success. So what I did is after I had some successful tournaments just on the local area, I decided to jump in the ABA Opens
Hmm.
for only 1 year. And I competed, had some success. I was constantly getting my 5 fish limit, which goes a long way in tournament fishing, and ended up finishing the year in third, qualifying for the Ray Scott. Had some stuff going on with a family, so I couldn't fish the Ray Scott, which I really wanted to because I think that was the year he passed away. So I would love to have been there, but the following year I wanted to step up, fish the BFLs, and the level of competition is still there.
Hmm.
It may be a little harder in the BFLs, but what makes the BFLs a little bit more difficult is when you have these bigger fields, the pressure from day one of practice. Usually I start on a Wednesday. The fish are fairly easy to catch, but by the time the tournament gets here on Saturday, it's a different ball game.
Yeah, tell me about because I looked up your stats a little bit from this year. I guess your worst finish we could call it was 50th, I believe.
I think it's like 52nd, something like that.
50, yeah, which is really not bad in the fields that come about with the BFLs. So how are you managed to be successful in those bigger fields?
For me, during practice, I've been very fortunate to locate better quality fish. I have struggled this year filling my limit, and it's either the fish, I have to relocate them, and when I relocate them, there's just not the amount of fish in that area. Um, but when I'm around the fish, I'm usually around a larger than average size, whether that's, half a pound or a pound bigger. And then I usually end up with a kicker fish every time I fish. And that's just because I'll throw some baits that I know will get a bigger bite. And, we went to Smith Mountain Lake in March, and I was having really good success in under boat docks. I was skipping a 4-inch swim bait underneath there. And then by the time tournament got here on it was Saturday. We had a bad cold front come in. It was pouring down rain and had to completely relocate my fish. It took about 3 hours. I was completely soaked. My co-angler was soaked. We were miserable.
Hmm.
Um, but I made a cast and I ended up catching the big fish of the tournament, which was 7 pounds 5 ounces. So I only ended up catching another fish underneath the dock, which was I think it was like a pound 9 ounces or something. But that was enough for I think like a 50-second finish.
Yeah, that's not bad. Home lake for me is Smith Mountain, so I can definitely understand how tough it could be in March and everything, the different weather patterns. Um, and I think one of your best finishes, if I'm not wrong, was Kerr Lake, um,
Best was actually the James River this year.
James River. So tell me a little bit about your best finish. What seemed to come together for you there?
So for me, last year the James, I struggled because I had my Z18. I stayed up close and I fished the Appomattox. I did get on a bite during practice last year, where I should have had about 10 pounds, but something changed with the tide and the fish just didn't fire like they were supposed to. I ended up catching 3 small fish late in the day, and it kind of hurt my tournament. And so this year, just doing some research and watching other tournaments, I know that you're going to have a lot of success if you go down to the chick and you get on them when they're biting. And I'm very familiar with the way that the tides, affect these fish because I fish these tidal rivers near me. They're not as influenced by the current as they are like the wind. So if you have an outgoing wind or incoming wind, then it'll back it up or pull the river out. And so I made that long run to the chick, which I focus all my practice on, and I'm very familiar with fishing around cypress trees because that's what I have here in the Jacksonville area on the Neuse River. And so that was my comfort zone. I went out there to fish for 5 keepers, and usually those 5 keepers on the chick are going to be better quality fish. So I kind of put all my eggs in one basket and made the run, and it paid off. I did end up having 4 fish when I left the chick, and ended up catching 2 more to coal out late in the day on the James River, which is about 3 miles away from the launch ramp.
That sounds pretty successful to me. I've actually never been up there to fish the James. I really want to get up there. My plan is to fish as a co-angler this year for the BFLs,
Okay.
fish as many as I can. Having kids that can change some things up, but
Yeah, I got 4 myself, so I know.
yeah, I got one that's 1.5, so that can change some things up. But I guess my biggest thing is trying to figure out. Of course, I won't have any control of where we go, but
Right.
fishing the tide and using the correct baits at the right time is going to be a big thing. So that's the next thing I wanted to get into. What are some baits that you use this year? Some techniques that helped you be successful?
So my baits for this year, my go-to, it didn't take me long to think about this because I can go back and look at all my videos, but I'd have to say the first one is the Z-Man jackhammer. This one is the golden shiner color with a missile bait spunk shad. It's the goby color.
Mhm.
Um, that one is the one that won me big fish at Smith Mountain Lake. And how I kind of figured out that the chatterbait was going to be the deal was in practice, I was on a swim bait bite. And whenever I relocated the fishing tournament, my co angler was throwing a jackhammer, and he ended up catching 3 of my fish that I was looking at on active target, where I was targeting him with a drop shot or a Demiki rig, and I would literally watch him leave my bait and go eat his. And he ended up winning second in that tournament. And so I was like, well, shoot, I'm going to pick up a Z-Man jackhammer, and I started chunking it, and that's when I caught the big fish, and I am catching my other smaller fish later in the day. That was also this same bait, this one right here. I didn't lose it. That's still from Smith Mountain, and this is also the one, I had my best finish on the James River, the same bait. Not the same
So
trail though.
so I do know the co-angler that won one of the Smith Mountain Lake events won it on a gizzard shad and a jackhammer with
Mm.
a I think it was one of the Crush City mayors on
Yep.
the back of it, which Smith Mountain Lake is not really known for a chatterbait bite. The big swim bait bite's really good there.
Mhm.
But unlocking that kind of brought something in my head like, why am I not throwing a chatterbait more there?
So one
Um,
thing I learned, and especially this year I've learned a lot, was if you have a lot of wind, and you have a lot of, um, rain or something that's breaking that surface tension of the water and it's causing a lot of noise, throw a loud bait, whether that's a, spinner bait or a chatterbait, and they'll key on it a little bit better than they would a finesse bait. So that's something I learned in just the tournaments I fished this year.
yeah, that was crazy to me. And when I listened to their podcast that they did, I was like, huh, chatterbait, that's interesting. But it was raining. I think it rained pretty much all day.
It did. It
Uh,
was terrible.
yeah, I couldn't imagine that. Those tournaments, I probably just want to stay home. Not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, that one my co-angler a few times, because I think we ended up relocating the fish around 11:30, 12, and up to that point we both had zero fish, and I was bragging, I had this, solid practice, and you can't win it in practice, but I did have a good practice, and we eventually just relocated the fish, and it was game on, and it all happened within like an hour and a half too.
So, what does practice look like for you? Because I know a lot of people do it differently. Like they take 3 days. They use one day just to ride around, idle around, look for fish. Second day, kind of the same thing. And the last day, they definitely don't catch any fish. They
Right.
just kind of search it. So, what does it look like for you?
So for me, I do, get around, or I will go out and, ride around a little bit to scan. But a lot of the times I've done enough research and I kind of can identify different things on the water that I like, to my standards. And when I get out there and I start fishing, I'll start fishing within an hour of getting on the water on day one. What I want to do is I want to get on the front of that boat and look through, the active target. And I really want to see if I actually see active fish. Like if I'm going to go to a stump flat, I'm going to look to see if those fish are holding to the stump or if they're, suspended in the water column, because that'll tell you a lot with what those fish are doing. Like right now in Kerr Lake, I landed on a spot immediately where we had schooling bass and schooling striper, and I could see it on my, active target, but I can also see it just by, the fish blowing up on the water. And it kind of keyed me on in the first 30 minutes of practice that those fish might be schooling. And if they are, then I need to locate bait. And it helped. But then we had some changing weather conditions by the time Saturday got, where the fish, they were still schooling, but they completely moved away from their primary point locations because there was so much fishing pressure during practice.
Mm, that's good to know. Like coming from because I used to own a boat and I put live scope on it. I could never figure out the live scope thing.
It
Everybody says it's so easy, like you just put it in the water and catch fish. It doesn't work that way.
does not work that way.
I've seen several times where I throw at them and they look at it and be like, I'm turning my head. See you later.
Or you catch a big
That's
crappie.
yeah, or some random other fish that you thought was a bass. But you do learn a lot about fish behavior and what they do. So this upcoming year or after, because BFL's just ended
They
or the
did. I'm fishing the regional, which is the final one for me, unless I make the All American, which got moved from Clarksville because of the storm. It's now Watts Bar, and so it's going to be an interesting one because we have three different slot limits. We have largemouth, spotted, and smallmouth bass, all within different slot limits. So
is
that's another
smallmouth
big.
18.
18. Yep,
Yeah. And then spots are 12, and I'm sure largemouth are 14,
it's 15. Yep.
15. Yeah. I knew it was weird down there. But that'll be an interesting one. I was really interested to see how people would have done on Clark's Hill. But Watts Bar is probably just as tough as Clark's Hill is.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, but if you have, those clay banks will help you out for sure down there. because it's a lot of mountain and steep drop offs and stuff.
Yeah, and
Uh,
so, you were asking me earlier, what baits, I had my success on this year. And my next bait would be the football jig, which this one is a Kitech. Um, it actually is a tungsten head, so it's smaller, but it's pretty sensitive. I have it with the Yamamoto, twin tail,
mhm,
and for some reason that bait, especially on Kerr Lake and some of these other bodies of water, it gets bit. You either drag it or you can swim it in the water column, and
mhm.
those fish will eat it up just like it is, a bait fish coming by them.
What's the weight on that one, or do you
This
remember?
one is a 3/8. I
Mhm.
usually will go up to 1/2 if I need to get it down deeper, but I try to stick with that 3/8 size.
Gotcha. Yeah, because fall rate could be key as
Yeah.
well. So, do you have any other baits that you thought, what's some baits that you think could work this time of year? Because we're getting into that fall time period. We're getting into that fall turnover, if it's not already happening.
So yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. My other one got to be the drop shot. This one
Mhm,
is the Zoom Finesse Shaky.
mhm,
Um, I always have a drop shot tied on. I've actually won several tournaments on a drop shot, and it's either I'm throwing right up into cover or I'm targeting schooling fish, and that fall rate, the way it twirls when it goes down, those fish for some reason are drawn to it, and if they follow it down and they don't hit it right away, change up the different sizes and or different weight sizes too, and sometimes you can get those fish to key on that. And that actually is the same bait that I was able to get my four keepers on Kerr Lake because I was catching them on the jig and they completely went away from the jig on tournament day. I think I ended up catching one um, that I weighed in on a jig, and the rest came on that drop shot.
So, do you have a specific color you use, specific
Usually,
weight size?
usually the June bug, Zoom worm, or the watermelon red. Those are my two go-to. And if I get on a super, super clear body of water, kind of like Smith Mountain sometimes, or my home body of water, which is Lake Sutton, it's a power plant lake,
Mhm.
I'll either go black or I will go with a darker June bug color that has like red flick in it.
Mm. I never thought about the black at Smith Mountain Lake. I don't know why. I
Yep.
always thought that was, but I did hear like smallmouth go crazy over the black,
Yeah,
which
it's absence of color, so they can't really tell what it is.
yeah, it's just in their face shaking around. So yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Some
What's
other
your weight
baits.
size? Oh yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
weight. Um, be the like teardrop or the cylinder. I throw the TKO tungsten, but um, I usually throw I think it's the 3/16 size, and then
Mhm.
I'll up it one more or one down depending on what I need. But I always start off with that 3/16, and then if I need to have that quicker fall rate, I'll go up to I think can't remember what size the next one is. It's 1/4 usually
One
the
fourth,
highest I'll go
yeah.
up to. Yeah.
That's kind of where I stay is around that 3/16, 1/4. It seems like the sweet spot the way they like to fall.
Hmm.
So I do watch all of your videos. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a huge fan. That's why I wanted to have you on.
Okay.
But I do notice you do use the drop shot a lot.
Yes.
Um, and I was trying to figure out, I was like, all right, how's he rigging it? Like, what
Mm,
what's he doing differently that I'm not doing it? So do you Texas rig it
I
or do you
do.
nose hook it?
A
Okay.
Texas Rig. And I'll tell you the reason why I do that. I did when I first learned the drop shot. It was one of the first ones I learned because I used to fish a drop shot differently when I fished with my dad in the bays down there in like Mobile and area. We would
Hmm.
fish for catfish. We would fish for redfish, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of fished it differently, and then as I started targeting bass, I was just lipping it, and I was getting hung
Hmm.
up like crazy because you can't just throw a drop shot in a brush pile without getting hung up. It's
Yeah.
impossible unless you Texas rig it. If you Texas rig it, and I have the Gamakatsu 1/0 off shank,
Hmm.
so that one obviously it's a sharp hook. It's good. Once I hook up, I usually don't lose fish. I rarely ever lose fish. Um, but if you Texas rig it, and you throw it into a brush pile, you're slowly pulling it out of the brush pile, or if you throw it over a log and you're slowly pulling over it, unless that weight gets stuck, which usually you can break the weight off, uh, I rarely ever break that drop shot off. Like
What
maybe
knot do you
once per
use?
trip. Say again?
What's the knot that you use? Are you using a Palomar knot or just a
Um,
regular clinch knot?
I think it's the polymer. I think it's the polymer if I'm not mistaken. I think so. The key is you have to run the line back through the eye,
Mhm.
and then you want it where it sits, like that.
Straight up,
Yep.
yeah. And I think the biggest problem with me with the hookup ratio is like I use the double clinch knot, which is, I mean, it's a great knot, but
Mhm.
you break off so easily. Even if it's just a little bit of fray, it's just gonna boom. And I've been trying to test out knots to keep it from or be more durable and stronger, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It drop shot I have a love or hate relationship with. It's one of those baits that you're gonna catch a lot of fish on it, but
Mhm.
if you don't like really slowing down, um, you struggle with. I'm a shaky head guy. I love
Okay.
dragging a shaky head, or hopping it, whatever you want to do. But and I'm more of like a moving bait kind of guy.
Mhm.
I can't stand just sitting there just dragging something. But a lot of people are very finessing. I commend them for it because they have more patience than I do.
Mhm.
But also you need those baits to be able to slow down and catch those finicky fish that most people aren't catching.
Yeah, and these fish are getting pressured, crazy. There's so many tournaments. It's probably 3 tournaments every weekend. It's just, crazy how many boats are out there, but, drop shot is one of those things when they're on it, they are on it good. But when they're not on it, even a shaky head sometimes won't work.
Yeah, yeah, like I said, it's one of those baits that I love it when it works, but I hate it when it doesn't.
Mhm.
But do you have any more secrets or secret baits you got?
Um, I wouldn't say necessarily secret baits. Right now, if you locate fish, especially on like Kerr Lake and some of these other reservoirs that have a big population of bait fish, you start to find those bait fish and you start to find them schooling. You got to have you a walking bait tied on. I'd have a chatter bait more with a shad color, natural looking, and then even maybe a finesse Damiki rig set
Oh,
aside so you could throw it in that middle of the school and pop it a few times. And if they commit to it, they're going to be committing probably most of the day. But if they don't commit to it, then you need to set it aside because you're going to waste a lot of time with the Damiki.
so do you believe in the kind of the saying that the Demiki rig dies at some point,
Oh, it
like the
does
bite dies?
for
Okay,
sure.
yeah,
It does. I mean, you could tell almost right away. I'll usually throw 2 or 3 different colors to see if they're really want it. And I'll try use a couple different sizes, and you could find out within the first 30 minutes that if they want that bait or not. Um, Usually pick up a chatterbait, they'll either attack it or they'll run from it. And then
yeah.
the top water, if you're good enough with your electronics, you throw the walking bait or a buzz bait, and if those fish start to come up on it, they might be keying on to top water bait. But if those fish aren't even paying attention, then just set it down.
So what's your go-to top water this time of year?
Right now, it'd be a walking bait. I usually
Any,
throw the walking
yeah.
bait by Uzuri.
Okay. Yeah. Oh shoot, what is that? I just saw one the other day.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think they call it like the pencil or something like
the
that.
pencil. Yeah, I can't. See, I'm a big mega bass,
Okay.
guy. So I'm throwing like the dog X and I can't even think what that word is, the dynamite or something like that.
Hmm.
So that one's a sneaky
They
good.
are.
What do you think about like a rattle trap bait? You don't see it thrown in the fall a lot, but it
No, you
catches it in the
don't.
fall.
And honestly, I don't throw it a lot either. I probably should throw it a lot more, but I haven't had a lot of success, so it's not a bait I have confidence in. But I have heard, some of my travel buddies be throwing it on the tidal rivers that have grass, and they'll be ripping it through the grass, and they'll be catching fish. But I can't seem to get, bit on it.
Yeah, I kind of got onto it a couple years ago, because people aren't throwing it, and they're like, "Oh, it only works in the springtime or pre spawn." No, it works in the fall.
Hmm.
If they're chasing bait, it's gonna work, because they're looking for that easy. easy meal. I'll usually use the quarter size or the smaller size to mimic a bait fish looking
Right.
thing. And Smith Mountain Lake, it usually has the smaller threadfin, the LY, and the can't even think the gizzard shad are huge, but this time of year the bait fish are a little bit smaller. So
Mhm.
matching the hatch is pretty much what you need to do down there.
Yeah, it's hard too
Um,
whenever they're super small.
mhm. 3-inch swim bait on a 1/8 ounce head. That's
Mhm.
what I've seen that works pretty well. So, what are some plans for next season? Are you going to continue with the BFLs? And
So, you know, next year I've, looked at the financials of, do I fish the BFLs or do I fish the Toyotas? I like the level of competition of the BFLs, but I also would love to, to see how I would stack out at the Toyotas just to see if, I'm good enough to compete with them guys. Um, I'm still undetermined right now. It depends on what my work schedule looks like, depending on I've already looked at the schedule for Toyotas, and if I did fish the Toyotas, I'd fish the northern ones, which I have
mhm,
no history with smallmouth. So I might have to take a few trips up there and start, learning the St. Lawrence River or Lake Champlain, something I really, wanted to do. Or, I might just jump back into the BFLs and fish the Shenandoah division would be the division I decide to go next year just because they're going to the James twice. I believe the Super is on the James, and then they go to the Potomac, and then they go to Smith Mountain Lake.
yeah, I kind of debated on what I want, like which division I wanted to go with. I kind of want to like skip around and do both Piedmont and Shenandoah
Mhm.
because I live like really in the middle of, you know, Smith Mountain Lake, Philpott, that area. So, Kerr Lake's really not that far from me. It's probably about 2 hours,
Right.
and then Smith Mountain's in my back door. Um, so I've kind of just might want to flip flop both divisions just to see which one I like better. I
Yeah.
have no experience on tidal fisheries. I grew up fishing rivers for trout, not bass.
Mhm.
But it has similarities. But I have no experience on tidal water. So I don't
Yeah.
know how successful I would be at the James and Potomac. I hear I have to go to the Potomac, but I just don't know, success wise, how that would work for me.
Yeah.
Um, but just sticking with what I know.
Yeah. The
Um,
Potomac is, full of hydrilla, full of pads. And if you're not familiar with, flipping with heavy sticks, with heavy weights, you can't go wrong throwing a, chatterbait or spinnerbait all day long or a frog because you may only catch one or two fish, but on those baits, you're going to catch better quality fish, especially as a co-angler.
mhm,
You only need to catch one or two and you'll probably, do pretty good. But as a boater, sometimes it depending on the Potomac. Potomac is weird because the Potomac don't have a lot of the cypress trees like the James or the Chickahominy
mhm,
does. So for me, you have to get out there and start throwing the frog around. And if you get an area where it's just dead, you can waste a lot of time.
yeah. So we're getting to near the end of the show. Is there any sponsors, anybody you would like to shout out, thank for this season?
Yeah, I would like to send a shout out to English Choice Marine. They've backed me all year, and I honestly couldn't do what I'm doing now. And so I'm hoping that our partnership continues in the 2025 season and the future. If I decide to fish the Toyotas, I'm definitely going to need their support, and they've been great to work with. They, they support. I believe they sell mostly, whitewater marine boats,
Hmm.
and they also have their own online tackle store at acmtackle.com. So if you're not familiar with it, check it out. They're a great business. They're supporting the hurricane, people right now with all the devastation. They're raising, funds, and also they're raising water, diapers, all that stuff to get some relief efforts. So it's a great business. And so people should support them. But also TKO Tungsten, they're actually one of my very first sponsors. And it's a just a local home-owned business. He originated from California, but he's now in Tennessee. And so I'm up there for the regional. I might stop by and say, hey, I haven't actually met him in person, but it'd be great to link up with a company that supported me for the last 3 years.
Yeah. Well, we definitely appreciate you coming on before the first cast. Good luck next season. Also, guys, follow him on YouTube, all social media, Facebook, Instagram, River Bass TV. Great, great content. Keep it rolling. I learned so much, and you guys will as well. But Shawn, I really appreciate it taking the time
Appreciate it.
out today. And if you guys like this kind of stuff, subscribe, follow, listen. Helps us out, and we will catch you guys on the next one. Appreciate it.
All right, take it easy, man.